Welcome to Everyday Entrepreneurs Everywhere with your host, Chris Parker.
And welcome back to Everyday Entrepreneurs Everywhere. This is Chris Parker, and I will soon be having a conversation, and in this case, a true back and forth conversation with Marc Prensky. And Marc Prensky is a visionary author, speaker. He coined the term digital native versus digital immigrants back in 2001. And those terms are actually included in the dictionaries. He's working on his 9th book about empowerment of children. And this is all part of his mission to, benefit and create a stronger, healthier 2 billion children around the world. So his ambitions are audacious and his opinions are clear. This is all part of the program that he's running with Planet Pilots. And my 2 boys are members of Planet Pilots. And so you can go to the show notes and click through there. That's planetpilots.org. And he is on their board of advisors. And the Empowerment Hub and the approach related to Planet Pilots is very much inspired by Marc's vision. So enjoy. We will be cutting the conversation in 2 parts because of the length. This was actually me being invited to their platform. And as I do sometimes, I say, hey, can we just record this? And if this is really interesting, we can make it a podcast for everyday entrepreneurs everywhere as well. So here you go. Again, this is part 1 of the conversation with Marc Prensky.
Hi, Chris. I'm really glad to meet you. It sounds very interesting. I would love to see your feature films, your movies, to get some idea of what your creative mind thinks like and about. And so that'll be great. I'm writing my 9th book about empowering kids. It's going to be called Empower Our Kids Now or something like that. And it's a book for adults. I originally was going to try to write it. It's a book for adults and kids, but basically it's a book designed to try to help adults see a new perspective on kids and to look at them not as people who should be seen or not heard, or look at little us's, or look at people who need a lot of education before they can become useful adults, but to see them as very empowered human beings, equally empowered, who are younger but can do a lot of stuff. And as I said previously, I see the 20th century as the education century. I see the 21st century as the empowerment century. And I think what was starting to emerge in the world, and I'm not inventing this, I'm curating it, is an idea of how to take the 21st century kids, all the kids, 2 billion kids, and help them get more power in the world to do positive things. And I think that they're empowered by technology, certainly, if as soon as they get it. And if we think 10 years down the road, it's coming to everybody. If they're also empowered by different beliefs, by seeing the world differently. And the question is, how do adults come to see the world differently? Because beliefs are incredibly hard to change from the outside. But once you have an aha moment, once you have an epiphany, your beliefs are totally different. They change in an instant. And so the questions that I really have for you are about your own beliefs, what you think about how you see kids, whether you've come to change your perspective on kids by whatever experiences you've had or watching your own kids, and what this means in a sense for the world. So that's what I want to have the conversation about. I can also speak later on to what you just talked about, everyday entrepreneurs everywhere, because I see that as a way to empower kids. And there's other movements going on in the world like mass entrepreneurship. I don't know if you're familiar with this, but it's really, that's very important to me.
Beautiful.
And let me add one final piece, and then I'll let you talk for almost the whole time.
Great.
I see kind of three phases. I see there's there's when kids are young, and what we do now, I call the whole way we have now of bringing up kids lame. What we do when they're young is we load all our most essential beliefs and hopes and everything onto them, and then we send them off to learn about mastering content for eventual jobs. That's what we call school, and then we just let them aimlessly muck around looking for employment. That's kind of how we bring up kids today. That's the lame way. And there's a much better way, which is helping them find their empowered beliefs and their own unique value and their new connections and their new power and their new and then apply those to projects which make the world better, especially while they're younger, and then eventually to meaningful work that improves humanity, and all in service of realizing their dreams, which is something that kids could never do before, or couldn't do as easily, but they can do that either in a small sense or in a big sense, starting much younger. So that's far better than the lame. So I try to think of those three categories. And obviously, the entrepreneurship actually probably goes through all three of them. So there you go. That's what I'm looking for. Look forward to hearing your perspective.
Really excited to be here. And I want to preface that I am not an expert parent. In fact, I oftentimes wonder if I know what I'm doing. And so I received some of these questions about empowerment. I believe this is what I'm doing, but I'm really interested to get into the conversation and learn and discover. One of the stories from my life that really triggered me is being an introvert, thinker, architect type mind. A gentleman named John Creer, sort of a second father. When I was about to have my first kid, I was visiting him back in the States, and he sort of whispered in my ear that every child has a book about how to raise that child, but you can only write the book when the child has grown up. And that just gave me such a relief coming from someone who I really respected, that, okay, I need to discover this along the way with each of these two people. And I've got two boys, 10 and 11. In a way, and I'm sure we're going to get into beliefs, the belief systems that we bring are already, I think, mixed and multicultural. My wife is Dutch, I'm American. We've both traveled a lot. Both of them have measured high IQ, and both of them have dyslexia. So there are all of these nuances of humanity and being a person that we stay in touch with, throughout the whole journey. So, really fascinated and eager to contribute. So,
Well, the first thing you said was interesting. Everything you said was interesting, but let's take them one at a time. I'm not an expert parent. Of course, nobody is. Some people think they are. There are different ways of parenting, but I'm with you and with your friend, John Creer, in that I take it from the perspective of the kid. So I think about, and maybe this goes back to when I was a kid, there was almost nobody who really listened to me and was able to say to me, oh, I kind of really see who you are. You might try this, or you might try this, or you might try this. I had one uncle who tried his best. And I think that it's possible, exactly what you said, by listening to kids and by asking them the right questions and by observing them, and this is Maria Montessori, observe the kids, to find this out much earlier. to help them write that book, to help them help you understand how to bring them up. And the way I see that is, how can they have the maximum amount of power to do what they want to, assuming that's a positive thing to do. And that's so in a sense, that's the way I see the role of parenting. It's not sending your kid here or sending your kid or making the choices that you would make for your kid. It's listening and finding out who that kid is and helping them essentially realize their dreams, because I've never met a kid without dreams. And so you're right that everybody's different. But I think it's really interesting to take it from the kid's perspective. And I don't know, I just reread what's Neil Stephenson's book, Diamond Age, where that's all about the primer that the kid gets that does that interacts with them in that way. And that's kind of an interesting perspective. Can we look at kids not to make them us's, not to advance our version of humanity, whatever it is, our beliefs, our culture, our anything else, but to say, what do you want to be? What do you think? And that we're not so good at that.
No. And because of course I'm bound to my own beliefs and my own awareness, and I'm aware that I come in with all these preconceived notions. A couple of responses. What I strive to do in seeing the person in my children is to, whenever possible, and I'm not perfect, sometimes I get frustrated and won't you just do what I say, because that I think that's sort of the disempowerment part. When you raise your voices because someone's not behaving, as opposed to listening to you. But really, the more I can be calm, the more I can be true to my own self, my own empowerment, the more that I can be self-loving and therefore able to fulfill the responsibilities of partner, peer, parent. I find that I am able to much easier see beyond the short-term behavior to the person inside. And then I can have that conversation and also know when not to have the conversation. So if a little person is really thrashing around and in a fit of anger, sometimes I can just go in and just hug that little person and say and just say, be angry, and afterwards, sit down and then say, okay, well, what happened? What was going on inside? Why were you angry inside? And from an early stage, I started introducing the words strategy, meaning, okay, Nate, this and this happened, this event happened, this is how you reacted. Do you think you could come up for yourself a new strategy to deal with that, which is more, that helps you stay happier, if that's a goal for you, and then have that conversation? So I know for me, it's more of a, I'm really struggling with the concept of empowerment, because in my beliefs, at least as I'm trying to reflect, I think what I'm trying to do is reduce my disempowering actions in order to create the space for them to thrive. And this is a conversation I've had with my wife. Again, high intelligence, dyslexic kids who have very different personalities. One's very introverted and one's very extroverted. The question is, how can we fulfill our role of creating a safe space at home and at school for them to discover themselves and learn in the best way possible? And that's something that we keep scratching our head on, because education based on your lame school torture cycle is really a one size fits none environment. So it's kind of a question of, how do we get into the right school, hopefully with the best teacher? What can we do? What other extracurricular activities like Planet Pilots could we provide to them without stuffing so much down their throat? Last comment is, and because I think you're probably, I see you making notes as far as maybe some feedback. But I do have some rules, meaning and maybe this is disempowering, but something I learned from my father. And I told my kids, you will be in a team sport. That is non-negotiable. Which team sport is totally up to you. I really don't care. Find your space. But for me, the learning of socializing in a team sport in times of stress and camaraderie, that is a belief that I have that's important. But the actual sport itself was, you do that. And one boy has stayed with soccer, European football, the whole time, and another boy has changed around. And I thought, great, just find your space. And for me, that, because I'm also able to be clear on that to them, okay, this is what I'm expecting, team sports, and this is why. And then you do what you want to do. That creates, I'm not sure, I don't know, is that empowering or disempowering? I really don't know how to filter that, but it seems to work for us.
Well, that's really interesting. Thank you for that perspective on your kids. I heard a bunch of different things in there. The one thing that is, I think, important to differentiate is the day-to-day from the long-term listening. We all go through lots of things day to day. Our parents are frustrated, or they do what they do. The question is, are they real? Do we grow up really feeling like, boy, they understood me and they supported me? So, for example, one thing that occurred to me is, do you include video games as a sport? So I would. My kid does that. He doesn't do any other sport. I don't give a shit. But he does interact with teams and get that kind of interaction frequently on his thing. The real question, other than the day to day, is, does your kid feel heard by you? Does your kid feel listened to you by you? Does your kid feel you have your own ideas about where they should go, and you are clearly a tiger parent with regard to that one thing? And suppose your kid just hated it and had no interest in a team sport and just was, wanted to be a poet on his own in the corner. Would you hear that? That's the real thing that I'm looking for. So I'm looking for hearing what the kids say. And there are lots of ways that it's not easy, because they're not articulate about telling us. They often we intimidate them, so they can't tell us. I didn't know how, when we moved from New York to California, I didn't know how stressed my kid was until I read a piece that he wrote at that time. And so that's what was going on, So I would like to open up those kind of communications, if it's at all possible. Mm-hmm. And I see, there are various ways to do it. We don't know them all. Wouldn't it be great if every year, say on their birthday, a kid could take some kind of a game or interesting or instrument or something, and it would say to them, hey, based on your answers, I would suggest you explore this and this and this and this. Nobody ever said the words R&D to me until I was in my 30s. And that's essentially who I am and what I do. If somebody had said it earlier, it would have helped. So that's one thing, is finding out who you are. What are your strengths? We focus a lot on weaknesses and make them better. But no, what are your strengths? What do you contribute uniquely to the world? And especially now, we're finally starting to focus on that every kid is unique, and that we don't need to replace. That what happened through the 20th century is essentially it was a form of replacement. Your kid would grow up to replace somebody in the world who was already a programmer or this or that or a doctor or something like that. And so we kind of knew what to do. If you're going to replace somebody, you learn what they have and what they've known and what they do. Now we don't do replacement anymore, just like we don't do repetition. Machines do repetition, and we have to invent the new interaction between humans and machines that will be different. and we'll be team based, and we'll be we're inventing that. So what we really need to know for each kid is their perspective. What do they care about? What are the problems in the world? Every kid sees problems. We all have problems. What do you care about? Which ones do you care about? Does the environment matter to you or not? Does your family matter to you or not? And then what strengths do you have, and how can you apply those? What do you love to do? How can you pull those things together is what I try to figure out. And I'm not sure, and I struggle the same way you do with my kid who's 15. That I've succeeded or that I will succeed, but that's the if I had a metric for your kids, it would be when they grow up, do they say, and even while they're growing up, do they say, my parents are incredibly good listeners and they're incredibly supportive of the things that I want. And obviously we have to negotiate things that are different between us, but they see me as myself. And that, I think, is something that's what I call empowerment. And then once that happens, then they help me do things, because empowerment is really getting things done. They help me do things that I'm proud of, that I think are the things that I should be doing, that I want to do, that, and then, if you're so inclined, that help others, and blah, blah, blah. But that's what empowerment is to me. It's the ability to get things that you want to do done.
Nice. I think again, not claiming to be any sort of perfect or even amateur parent, I'm discovering every day. One of the things that I believe we have as values as a family is to have just enriching experiences. One of the things I heard somewhere along the way was thinking about childhood development is kids who can have experienced things that they're learning in school firsthand are able to grasp much more. So if you read about Paris, that's one thing. But if a child has been to Paris and put it in context and has, and so one of the things that we do is explore with experiences. And I find that really enriching as well, just to see what they're discovering. And I think there's not only enabling them to pursue their passion, but also tickle, spark with, hey, what about this type of thing? And then see what they sort of glom onto. Do I consider digital games a sport? Not by that definition. Maybe I should. I have a slightly different view than my wife does on this, because I think she thinks digital, screen time is something else than I do. But what I have done is I've actually chosen to join them in Fortnite and go in there, and also not only to there's something that they do with their friends and me is because when I'm in there, it's generally them protecting me, as opposed to another type of dynamic. But I also said, it was like, well, I want to drive around the island in Fortnite. So can you guys do that with me? And a couple of their friends helped out, and we had to go get the fuel and stuff, and we just drove. And then another one was like, and I was like, I want to take the boats around Fortnite, and it's a way for me to go in and into that environment in a way which is not combative, and discover and share and learn, and that's so much fun. But one thing you said on a yearly basis to give them a bit of a survey or quiz, and maybe I'm asking the wrong question, but and I learned this from a friend of mine, Timon Meckel, that every year on their birthday we have a father-son dinner. And so we go out, and the question I ask them, it's not what do I need to hear from you, but it's more of what do you need from me as a parent? What can I do different to support you? And that is my question on those annual, and of course it's not the only time I ask a question, and then to add this is what I got from Timon on their 10th year anniversary. That dinner can be anywhere in Europe. And then on their 20th, I want to be able to have them to pick that dinner anywhere in the world, going back to the, experience things together. And I hope my dream for them is not only have they been heard and supported, but that they were also given the opportunities to discover and dabble safely in order to see what actually triggers them. Like, for example, I would have imagined that Quentin, who's very physical and dancing, would be more into like DJing and music and things like that. And actually, the other boy came out having figured out on his own on a computer how to make digital music. I was like, okay, that was not expected. Great. What, do more of that. If this is something that triggers you, how can I help you with this new discovery you've made? And I find that just joyful to see, okay, they're finding things, they're playing with things, they're learning things. How can I help that? And I, Planet Pilots, again, is a fun way that they haven't really thought about like a year vision or a year plan. And it's so much fun to talk to them about that after the Saturday session, because then we sit down and say, well, what is it really? Let's get deeper into this. Why is this important to you? These are just fun conversations to have.
There's so many ways that we can have better conversations with our kids, and a lot of people talk about it, work on it, and they do. The interesting here's my reaction to something you just said, which is, one kid's enriching experience is another kid's absolute, hell or nightmare. So it's that's our values, our perspectives coming through. And the hardest thing that I see is that we all have a set of values, and we all have a set of beliefs, and we all have these things, and they were all formed in the 20th century. So they were all formed in another environment, and yours may be playing a physical team sport is a great thing for any person to be able to do. Somebody's might be to speak multiple languages is a great thing for anybody to do. These are ours. And the first thing we do in life is lay them on our kids, right? So they know what we think. Right? They know what we think because we make it pretty clear to them what we think, like you just mentioned. It's harder in the other direction because their ideas are not necessarily fully formed or whatever. All they know is some things appeal to them, some things don't appeal to them. And if they don't appeal to them and they do appeal to their parents, whoops, we got a problem. So your dream for them is another thing you said. Who cares? It's their dream for them that counts. And your dream can influence that. And it should. You are their parent. You're going to do that. And all our adult dreams. But they might look at the world very differently. And they say, my dream is, I'll speak personally. My dream is to escape as fast as I can from the culture I grew up in, right? From the people I grew up with. I went off to college at 16 and I got out of there. Thank God. But each individual, that's who we are. We're people with an internal life.
Yeah. I don't think I said my dream for them was something specific. I don't remember my exact quote, but I think
you said my dream for them, ...
Yeah, I think my dream for them was to have the opportunity to explore and discover. And if I look at my own values, and I think my values haven't been confronted because they're not, lazy. They're not. Okay, they're kids, so they're doing their things, but they're not doing things that are inherently evil. I think my values and beliefs would be much more confronted if, I think if they were radically different than me, and what I'm curious of me, are they not radically different than me because of what I've done and impressed upon them, or is that just inherently who they are? Meaning, they're out socializing with the people that they are attracted to socialize with, and we try to stay out of deciding that for them. I don't think we ever have. They're out learning and discovering in different ways with structured and unstructured, and we try not to be directive in that too much. And so it's, I don't know, where's that balance between giving that nurturing nudge and being that tiger parent, as you stated earlier, is where do you find the wisdom of that? And I think in corporate life, that's sort of the definition I have of leadership, is when do you help someone or not? Meaning, if you set people up to succeed in their role and then they're failing, how do you have the wisdom to know when they just need to toughen up and get it done, or when they actually need help? And I think the same thing applies with parenting, is how do you make that judgment call? I don't know.
Obviously, it's tough. But I think my guess would be, or my experience would be, that in both cases we don't listen enough. You know, when as a boss, the best thing that I ever did for anybody was to say, "What do you want to do? What, okay, here's some money, go do it. You want to learn this software, you want to do this, you want to do that, go do it, and show me what you do with it, and that'll be fine. And what have you done? And amaze me, surprise me, right? Is a big word that I would go to. But the traditional way that humans have worked is we have these cultures, we have shared myths, we have various things that we think are good and that we pass down to our kids. That's how it's been. And the kids quickly, accept it if they're told that. When one of my favorite things is when I hire a new employee, or as somebody hires a new employee, I say, if you hire a new employee, you have less than a week to ask them the question, what do we do that's really stupid? Because in a week, they will be acculturated and they won't be able to tell you anymore. They will think that's the way we do it. So very often the first thing we do to kids is take away their individual thinking and say, you guys do this, whether it's religious or anything else, and you guys believe this. And then the next day they're starting to grow up and believe it. And so what's our role is a really interesting one. I think you said it earlier. Our role is to keep them safe. Our role is to keep them alive. That's really our key role, right? So if they're going to go do something that's really dangerous, we want to keep them from doing that. And school is the way we keep our kids safe while we work, right? That's essentially what we do. That's why we put them in a room and we say, okay, somebody's taking care of you. You got to stay there until you're ready, etc. So, but it's a very interesting, for me, that's why I'm so focused on beliefs. I wonder if kids had more choice early on to understand their beliefs, and you talk about exposure, enriching experiences. If kids were, allowed to decide what they think and maybe given more options and say, half the world believes this and half the world believes that, and what do you believe? And that's what I would like to see more of. And I know my kid has come up with some very strong beliefs, some of which I agree with, some of which I don't agree with. But they're his, and I'm happy to discuss them with him. And one thing that I do observe about my kid is that he doesn't go deep enough in his analyses. He'll hear something and repeat it and think it and stuff like that. So as a parent, that's one of the biggest things that I encourage him to do. If you're going to make a statement, at least know where it came from and back it up and know why you say that. Because that's how we get false news and all this stuff. Nobody does this, but after, so basically that and keep his commitments are all I require of my kid. Don't do stupid things. Know why you're saying something or why you have a particular opinion, and keep your commitments. That's really, to me, it's very simple. And so we spent a lot of time talking about kids growing up. My basics for kids are, one is I call it an ABC loop. Accomplish, better the world in some way, do it, continue. Right? You just get things
Well,
done. Do
I
things.
think this is the question of values, because you're really triggering me on self-reflection, that, as I stated earlier, because the boys are moving forward, they're active, they're hungry, they're meeting new people, they're making mistakes, they're getting in fights, and they're learning all of these things. My belief is similar to yours. I think this ABC: action and better the world and repeat. Would it be okay if a child decided and said, no, actually the rest of the world will make itself better, I'm just going to sit here and eat chips and play Fortnite? That would be
Oh,
much more confronting to me, but it seems like your values and mine is like, well, as long as you're contributing, you can have a really wide spectrum of freedom. But if you're not contributing, then somehow that seems to go really narrow again. I was like, well, why does everyone need to contribute? I inherently believe that we should give back and contribute, but that's also a belief.
yeah, it is a belief, and it's true, and it will, and I share. That's a belief that I share. That I think it's worthwhile. Um, I distinguish between achievement and accomplishment, and you can achieve a lot of things for yourself. You can climb the mountains, you can become the valedictorian, you can go to Harvard, you can do whatever you want, and it benefits nobody but you. And that's one thing you can do. Then there's another set of things you can do, which I call accomplishment, which are things that actually benefit other people. And I suppose if you want to say, no, I just want to be an achiever, I just want to be the best violin player in the world and lock myself in my room and play the violin, you can do it. I won't particularly want to be with you very much, but if you say that you're gonna, you know, that you want to do this because you enjoy playing for other people or making other people happy, or whatever it is, that appeals to me more. But that doesn't mean that you can't decide that all you're going to do is achieve. What I see in the world is that the achievement push comes mostly from the parents, and the accomplishment push in the directions that they want to comes mostly from the kids. So if a kid is really learning to play a game with his friends or her friends, and doing this and moving up the levels and stuff, that's a hell of an accomplishment. When you say I'm a level 60 in a game, you mean something, right? And so but we have our hierarchy of what is good and what benefits that we have to be, I think, a little bit careful of. So I don't know. I mean, it's a tough struggle, but the kid will tell you. If you tell them, are you accomplishing or are you, achieving? They'll know.
And a beautiful question to have, and also the question of what, and I will have that conversation with them on continuously. Not only what do I need to hear from them, but how can I see them better? I think that for me is a different perspective on the same thing. It's I don't know. For me, the conversations that I've had with my wife on what are the expectations for achievement, and that play a team sport. That's something. Is it the right thing? I don't know. I also really support their digital gaming or whatever their social interactions are. I personally would like them to get a some sort of degree of some sort. But why is that necessary? I don't know. That's purely something baked into me, and my wife doesn't have that. That's the American in me, that everyone needs a degree. Okay, I'm still wrestling with that one. But then when we've had conversations like on sexual preference and religion and other decisions that these people could make, I believe I'm open to whatever, and have those conversations and try not to pre-bake in taboo that being Mormon would be bad or being Christian would be bad or whatever. And part of the experiencing stuff that's also in my mind, although not specifically religious myself, those are fascinating rituals and ceremonies in life, and there's belief sets that they might choose to check into, which for me is great. I think that critical thinking dimension that you also had with your son, that if before you see something on TikTok and repeat it as truth, maybe apply some critical thinking. But if they come up with a different conclusion on how the universe works, Isn't that maybe even better rather than copying this error-prone BS that I've got going in my head? That's
What's interesting? You know what's interesting about that? There are lots of things interesting. One thing is that they're a different person from you in this one sense. They don't have a fully developed prefrontal cortex. You do. We don't know exactly what that means. The only thing they've told us is that it develops in adulthood, right? So as in adolescence. So, but it's certainly freeing. We know that it's a controlling mechanism in your brain and blah, blah, blah. We don't know enough about anything in the brain, but there's a difference. So they will, in some ways, see the world different from you. See, I would say to my kid, not you have to play a team sport that's not negotiable. I would say you have to try playing a team sport, and that's not negotiable. But if you play it and you give it a serious try, my wife wanted my kid to be a dancer. He did it. He tap danced till he could finally leave it. It's this whole thing about the baseball players push their kids into the baseball, and the kids. I don't know if you ever saw the wonderful South Park where the kid baseball teams figured out that their perspective was we want to suck the most at this, because if we suck, we don't have to play. So they were trying to outsuck each other.
I love it. And that is the end of part 1 of the conversation with Marc Prensky. And due to the length, we have cut the conversation in 2, and we will be publishing the second part very, very soon. So keep an eye out for part 2 of the conversation with Marc Prensky on Everyday Entrepreneurs Everywhere.
Thank you for listening. Like and subscribe to the podcast on your favorite player, and download the Simplicity Kit from ebullient.com.